Hey Jordan, this is a great question. I think this is more of a contributing factor to a underlying cause as opposed to the actual reason for it. If you look at what's happened over, say, like the last 50 years, we have had leader after leader in almost every major sect of Christianity, from the evangelical church to the Catholic church, where there has been scandals, whether those scandals be sexual related or whether they be abuse of power, abuse of resources, but countless scandals. And then you compound that with the things that have been happening in the world in general, institutions that previously were generally trusted by the public, like, health organizations, certain components of the government, maybe not the government as a whole, and even just experts in general, scientific experts, people that we would have generally trusted to tell the truth. And I think over the last, really kind of during COVID and probably building up to COVID, we were beginning to see an erosion of all of these institutions. And so you couple those two things together. You couple the erosion of the institutions in our general culture in conjunction with the scandals and breakdown in in kind of like your modern church. And then you add in the internet, which allows us to see these scandals in a way that you wouldn't be able to see them under normal circumstances because the news travels so much faster, as well as access to information that people didn't previously have at scale, right? Not just individually, but people have the ability to go on and do their own research on things at a level that they've never been able to do before, where your average person who's not a biblical scholar can go online and get access to scholarly information about the Bible without context, without understanding, and feel like an expert immediately because they have the knowledge, even if they lack the understanding. So you combine a general loss of trust, scandal which erodes credibility, with the ability to access information that previously would have been much more difficult to access, and something that your average person wouldn't even know where to begin to try and pull it up. A loss of trust in expertise, and all of that together has kind of created this weird situation where your average unstudied person can feel as though they have greater expertise than the most studied and most scholarly people, while simultaneously the people who previously claimed to be experts are being exposed left and right, which is making it to where even if you had a person who recognized the fact that they, through a quick internet search, that doesn't make them an expert, well, the loss of trust in expertise in general forces them to almost have to trust their own ability to study over the studies of people who've spent their entire lifetime working on these things, which really brings us to the root. And I think the root, at the core of everything, is a loss of credibility. I think the church, by and large, has lost its credibility. And it's because as a model, in a large way, at some point, I don't know when it happened because I'm not a scholar on this, but at some point, it seems that the church stopped leaning on the power of God and started leaning on the gifts and talents of its leaders. And simultaneously, it made the decision that scholarly endeavors, the ability to research the history and the information in the Bible, was of greater import than a person actually operating in their spiritual gifts and moving in power. Which means that the people, by and large, began to rely on the words of the people that were teaching instead of on the power of God, which is exactly what Paul talked about when, I believe he was talking to the Corinthians. He said, I didn't come to you with powerful oration. I didn't come to you with great messages and great words, but rather with the power of God, so that your trust would not rely on the words of men, but on the power of God. You see, Paul understood that if people's reliance and the way in which they feel affirmed that something is true is reliant on a person or an individual's teaching, or on an individual message or an individual idea instead of the power of God, if you could take out the person, then you can take out the people as well. Whereas, if the thing that brings the person to faith is an experience with the power of the risen Christ, if the thing that brought the person to the Lord was a personal and direct encounter with Jesus, that is something that cannot be shaken. Even when other leaders fall, even when if the institution itself loses credibility, those individuals will not be shaken, because what they hold on to is the head of the organization, not the organization itself. Now, am I saying we shouldn't gather and teach and preach and worship and do all these things? No, of course not. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just looking at this from a high general level, and I'm saying that I think the reason that you do a thing can at times be more important than the thing that you're doing. The Pharisees were following the law and doing everything that they were supposed to do by the law, but they were doing it out of a heart of self-righteousness, not out of a heart of humility and obedience. And so they were doing the right things for the wrong reasons, which is why they were condemned. In our case, I think we have a bit of both. I think we have a lot of people that have done the wrong things for the right reasons, gotten focused on numbers and driving crowds in, genuinely believing that if they just get people in the room, that's going to be good enough, right? And so I think you had a lot of people that abandoned the discipleship model and replaced it with this sort of collegiate model, and thinking that was going to work, because they were like, if we can just reach more people, and reaching more became more important than what you were reaching them with. And so I think you had a lot of people that were doing the wrong things for the right reasons, and then simultaneously I think you had a lot of people that are doing the right things for the wrong reasons. I think there were people who, recognized the power of worship, and they leveraged that in order to increase their economy and their visibility. I think there were people that recognized that preaching was really important, and we need to teach people. And so, but they began to gain power and relevance and all these other things, and so they began to do the right things for the wrong reasons. And I think as all of those things have been exposed, both people doing the wrong things for the right and the people doing the right things for the wrong, I think as all of those things have begun to surface and the fruit of those trees has begun to bear, I think people have looked at it and they've said, this isn't it. And I think that is, in conjunction with everything else I just said, I think is driving this kind of erosion. And I really think it all comes down to credibility. And the only way that we regain credibility, I don't know that I'm not actually sure that you can regain it. I almost think something new kind of has to emerge. And I don't know exactly what that is yet. I'm still working through that with the Lord, but I do know this. I know that the one thing that cannot be shaken is the power of God. And if we are walking in humility and we are allowing Jesus to lead and Jesus to impart gifts and to fit people together into his body as he sees fit, and we are operating as a people who lives for the observation and affirmation of what God is doing, and not a people who are doing the things that we want to do and doing it in Jesus' name, but rather allowing or sitting back and watching what Jesus is doing and then joining him in the work that he is doing. I think when we do that, and when people's confidence rests on the power of God, on experiencing the risen Christ, I think when those things are active, that is when we will have credibility, and we won't be as easily shaken. And Paul said as much. If you look at, I can't remember where the scripture is. I think it's in Corinthians, but it might be Ephesians. But it says that when we have reached the unity in faith, right? When we have achieved or been brought to, really is the right interpretation, brought to the standard of maturity set by the Messiah, then we will no longer be tossed about by every wave of doctrine and every clever teaching assembled by clever people, right? And so it speaks to this concept of the church will not be so easily shaken by different doctrines, by all of the nonsense that goes on, and people falling out and making mistakes, and just all the other stuff that has happened that has eroded the credibility. Those things will not be so easily shaken anymore, because each person has been brought to the standard of maturity. The thing that will protect the church over anything else is the individual maturity of the believers that are in the body, not the strength of the leaders that are supposed to protect that body. All right, so I know I said a lot there, so just to kind of succinctly bring this home for you, I think the short answer is yeah, fear and all of the things that you mentioned, these are issues for sure, and I'm sure there's been people that have been driven away as a result of that, but I really just think those things are more just affirmations of the underlying issue that I think a lot of people are kind of coming to, is that they just don't feel like the church as an institution is credible right now, and I think that is the underlying issue.